The glass doors of Hanwol restaurant did not shatter when he hit them. They swung inward with a crack that cut through the entire room like a starter pistol going off. 12 men, every one of them in dark suits. Every one of them carrying the specific stillness that comes from having done things they do not apologize for. 6 hands moved toward jacket interiors before the doors had even finished swinging. Jack skidded on the marble floor, breathing hard, water dripping from his uniform onto the floor in a spreading circle. He looked around the room, then he walked. Not ran. Walked. Directly to the center table. Kim Tae Yang was 38 years old. He had run the Yongsan Syndicate for 11 of those years. And in all that time, he had developed exactly one unbreakable rule inside this restaurant. Nobody walked toward him who wasn't afraid. This child walked toward him like fear was something that happened to other people. Jack grabbed his sleeve. My name is Jack Beaumont. I'm 7 years old. My mum is in trouble and you are the only person in this entire city who can actually fix it. The room was so silent you could hear the rain hitting the windows 3 floors above them. Seo Jun, Tae Yang's enforcer, a man who had once sat through a knife wound without changing expression, stepped forward. One look from Tae Yang stopped him completely. Tae Yang studied the boy, the soaked school uniform, the crumpled paper clenched in his small fist, the chin lifted at exactly the angle of someone who has decided they will not be dismissed and means it completely. He had a rule. 11 years. No civilians. No involvement in ordinary people's problems. It was the cleanest boundary he had ever drawn, and it had protected him more times than he could count. Seo Jun met his eyes, gave the smallest possible shake of his head. A reminder. Tae Yang looked at the boy. Then he pulled out the chair across from him. Sit down, he said quietly. Tell me everything. And just like that, Kim Tae Yang broke his own rule for the first time in 11 years. But before we go further, there is something you need to know about the night before Jack went to Hanwol. He had lain in his bed for 2 hours, completely awake, listening to the sounds of the apartment. His mother moving in the kitchen, the click of the kettle, the way she sat down heavily in the chair near the window, the specific sound of someone who has run out of the energy it takes to pretend everything is fine. Jack knew that sound. He had been listening to it for 4 weeks. Since the first time those men came, he had a plan, built it the way he built everything. Carefully, in stages, checking each piece before moving to the next. He knew the name. He knew the restaurant. He had the paper in his bag, faces drawn from memory, numbers memorized. He was scared. He was 7 years old and smart enough to know exactly when scared was appropriate. He thought about his grandmother Celeste. She had never once waited for someone else to fix something. She had told him, "The world moves for people who move first." She said it the way she said all true things, like gravity, like something he could depend on absolutely. He set the alarm on his watch for 4 p.m. the following day, the window between school ending and his mother getting home. He went to sleep, the deep, uncomplicated sleep of someone who has made a decision and is at peace with it. Jack told it the way he did most things. In order, with precision, without drama, which somehow made it more devastating than drama would have been. 3 men. They had come to the apartment building in Mafia 4 weeks ago, official-looking badges, practiced Korean. They told his mother that her work visa had what they called a compliance irregularity and that a private settlement would prevent the matter from reaching the Immigration Bureau. His mother's name was Kate Beaumont. She was a nurse. She had moved them to Seoul 18 months ago for a fellowship at Seongbuk General Hospital, leaving New Orleans with 2 suitcases and a 7-year-old, and the absolute certainty that she was built for more than staying still. She had built everything they had from nothing. Double shifts, learning enough Korean to make her patients laugh, turning a small apartment in Mapogu into something that felt like home. She had paid the men 3 times. The last payment had cleaned out the emergency account she had been building since they arrived. Jack unfolded the paper on the table. Crayon drawings. 3 faces, rendered with the careful attention of a child who had studied those faces and burned every detail into his memory. A license plate number, a badge number in his best handwriting. One of the men had flashed it quickly, but Jack had whispered it to himself the entire walk to Hanwol, over and over until it lived in him. Tae Yang looked at the paper without touching it. "How did you know to come to me?" he asked. "The lady at the corner shop near our building," Jack said. "She told me that if something is really wrong in this neighborhood, there is only one person worth talking to." He paused. "Also, you have kind eyes. My grandma Celeste back in New Orleans had the same kind of eyes. She ran our whole street and nobody messed with her." Something crossed Tae Yang's face so quickly that only Seo-jun caught it. Seo-jun had worked for this man for 9 years. He had never seen that expression before. Tae Yang slid the paper to Seo-jun without looking at him. "Run it," he said. "All of it. Now." The doors of Hanwol opened again 19 minutes later. Kate Beaumont came through them in blue scrubs, soaking wet, still wearing her hospital badge, moving at the speed of someone who had sprinted the last 2 blocks from where her taxi stopped in traffic. She spotted Jack at the center table, completely fine, eating warm rice with focused dedication. She crossed the room in 6 steps, pulled him to her chest with one arm, and turned to face the room. She was 5'6", unarmed, standing in a room full of men who were neither of those things. She did not flinch. She assessed the room the way she assessed a trauma bay. Fast, complete, no room for sentiment. Her eyes found Tae Yang. "I don't know what my son told you," she said. Her voice was completely steady. "I don't know who you are or what this place is, but I am his mother and we are leaving." Nobody moved. Tae Yang looked at her, not with the calculating assessment he gave everyone who walked into this room. Something quieter, something he couldn't fully account for. "Your son is completely safe," he said. "He was never in danger here. But before you leave, there is something you need to know about the men who came to your building." "What about them?" "They are not law enforcement," he said. "They never were." A silence. Kate processed that in real time, absorbing, calculating, recalibrating everything she thought she understood about her situation. "Sit down," he said, and then, "Please." It was the please that did it. She sat. Seo-jun laid it out in 4 minutes flat. The badge number was a retired officer's number pulled from a breached database. The 3 men had no official affiliation. 2 were former police, dismissed 3 years ago for conduct violations. The third had served 2 years for fraud. 4 months. 11 families. All foreign nationals on temporary visas. All people who lived with the fear that the word deportation was a trapdoor beneath their feet. Kate sat very still through all of it. Her hand was on Jack's back. "There is one more thing," Seo-jun said. He looked at Tae Yang. Tae Yang nodded once. "The leader of the group made a recording during one of his visits to your apartment," Seo-jun said. "Your voice, agreeing to pay, saying you would not go to the authorities." A pause. He planned to use it as insurance. If anyone came after him, he would send it to the Immigration Bureau and frame it as voluntary participation in an illegal arrangement. The colour drained from Kate's face. That was her fellowship. Jack's school. 18 months of everything she had built. Gone in a single-filed report. "Can he actually do that?" "He tried," Tae Yang said. 40 minutes ago, while you were in the taxi." He held up his phone. On the screen was a message. He sent it. Kate felt the room tilt. "To a bureau contact who works for me," Tae Yang finished. It was intercepted and deleted before it was logged. The recording does not exist anymore. The silence that followed was the kind that comes when a person realizes exactly how close they came to losing everything. Jack looked at his mother. Then at Tae Yang. Then back at his rice. "I told you," he said simply. "I told you he could fix it." 3 floors below the restaurant, in a room with no windows and no warmth, 3 men sat across a table from Kim Tae Yang. He named every family, every amount, every date. Without notes, without raising his voice. The temperature in the room seemed to drop with each name he spoke. When he finished, he slid a single piece of paper across the table. Full restitution. Every family? 48 hours. The leader, the one with the practiced official voice, the one who had stood in Kate's doorway 3 times and watched her pay, looked at the paper. Something calculated moved behind his eyes. The look of a man checking whether he still has leverage. We still know things, he said slowly. A nurse in Mapo-gu. A son who goes to... Seojun's hand came down on the table. One hand. That was all. The man stopped talking. Tae Yang looked at him. When he spoke, his voice was the quietest it had been all evening. If you finish that sentence, he said, you will never finish another one. Absolute silence. Full restitution. 48 hours. Then you leave Seoul. You do not return. You do not contact anyone on that list. You do not say my name. He stood. If I hear otherwise, from anyone, about anything, there is no version of what happens next that ends well for you. You know this? Act accordingly. He left the room. The 3 men did not speak to each other for a very long time. Outside Hanwoo, the rain had softened to a mist. Kate stood on the pavement with Jack's hand in hers. Tae Yang had followed them out, not to escort them, just to tell her directly that the matter was being handled and she would receive confirmation within 48 hours. He said it the way a man states a fact. No performance, no expectation of gratitude. Why did you do this? Kate asked. It was wrong, he said. It was corrected. That's not an answer. He was quiet for a moment. Your son walked across 3 dangerous streets in the rain to sit in a room full of men with guns and ask for help. He did it for you. A pause. The least I could do was listen. Kate looked down at Jack. Jack was looking up at Tae Yang with the complete and permanent loyalty he reserved for people who had genuinely earned it. We have banana pudding at home, Jack said with absolute seriousness. Mom makes it from scratch. You should come try it sometime. Kate briefly closed her eyes. The corner of Tae Yang's mouth moved. It might have been a smile. It was gone before she could be certain. Another time, he said. The envelope arrived 2 days later. Exact amount. No note. No name. Kate found it at 5 in the morning, still in her coat, coming in from a night shift. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at it for a long time. Then she put it in Jack's education fund. Not because she didn't feel the weight of it. She felt all of it. The complicated gratitude, the awareness of who had done this and what world he came from, the strange warmth of having been seen by someone who had no reason to look. She felt every bit of it. She kept moving. That was what she did. Kept working, kept going, didn't stand still long enough to feel the full weight of what she was carrying. But that night, when Jack was asleep and the apartment was quiet, she sat at the window and looked out at the Seoul skyline and thought about a man with kind eyes who had broken his own rules for a boy he didn't know. She thought about that for longer than was probably wise. 3 weeks later, a black car followed her home from the hospital. She noticed it 2 blocks out. Same headlights, same distance behind her, turning when she turned, slowing when she slowed. Kate had grown up in New Orleans. She knew what it looked like when someone was making a point. She went straight home, locked the door, put Jack in his room. Then she called the number she hadn't expected to use. He answered before the first ring finished. I know, Tae Yang said, before she had spoken a single word. We saw it. You're safe. Don't leave the apartment tonight. Who is it? A pause that told her exactly what she needed to know. Someone who thinks my involvement with you signals weakness, he said carefully. They are testing whether it does. And does it? No, he said. It doesn't. She heard something in his voice she had not heard before. Not fear exactly. Something adjacent to it. Controlled the way he controlled everything, but underneath the control, heat, urgency, something personal. Tae Yang, Jack is in this apartment. I know, he said. That's why I already have 2 men in your building. They've been there since I saw the car. A pause. I should have told you sooner. I'm telling you now. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, phone against her ear, city humming outside. Are we going to be okay? She asked. The pause before he answered was 3 seconds. She counted them. Yes, he said. I will make sure of it. She believed him. That surprised her. She was not a woman who believed things easily. Across the city, in a building in Yongsan that had no name on its door, Tae Yang sat in the back of his car for 4 minutes before going inside. He needed those 4 minutes. 11 years he had maintained one principle. Don't let anything matter enough that losing it makes you afraid. That principle had kept him clear-headed. It had kept the organization clean. It had made him extraordinarily good at what he did. He was afraid right now. Not of the men testing him. He knew how to handle that. He had handled worse before breakfast on more occasions than he could count. He was afraid of what it meant that his hands had tightened when Seo-jun told him about the car. He was afraid of the speed at which his mind had moved from information to action, the way it always moved fast, but faster tonight. More personal tonight. He got out of the car. There was work to do. He went and did it. The man's name was Cho Min-jae. 7 years. He had been with Tae Yang for 7 years. First call in a crisis. Trusted with logistics no one else could know. The man who had once physically pulled Tae Yang out of a negotiation in Busan that was about to go catastrophically wrong. 7 years of absolute reliability. He had sent the car that followed Kate home. Tae Yang found out at 11 p.m. He sat with the information for 60 seconds. Then, he called Min-jae directly. I want to understand your thinking, he said when Min-jae answered. No anger. No accusation. The flat precision of someone who has already decided and is being thorough about the reasons. She's exposure, Min-jae said. He didn't deny it. He never denied anything. It was one of the things Tae Yang had always respected. A foreign national connected to you is a thread someone can pull. You know that. I was protecting what you built. She has a son, Tae Yang said. I know. He is 7 years old. I know that too. And you sent a car to follow her home to make a point. To remind you what she costs, Min-jae said. Before it goes further. Tae Yang was quiet for a long moment. She doesn't cost me anything, he said. She and her son are not variables in an equation. They are people. This organization has never moved against people outside our world. That is a line I drew 11 years ago. I have not crossed it once. You're crossing it now, Min-jae said quietly. In the other direction. Yes, Tae Yang said. I am. A silence. You're done, Tae Yang said. Not your position. You, Min-jae. Done. You leave Seoul by Friday. I'll make sure you're taken care of wherever you go. We don't have a problem. As long as you are never in this city again. 7 years, Min-jae said. 7 years, Tae Yang agreed. Which is why you leave, and nothing worse. He ended the call. In the corridor outside his office, he put one hand flat against the wall. He had ended a 7-year loyalty, made himself operationally weaker in a way that would take months to repair. Chosen a woman and a child over the most reliable lieutenant he had ever had. He did not question it for a single second. That was how he knew. Something had shifted in him quietly and permanently from the moment a boy in a soaked school uniform had grabbed his sleeve and told him he had kind eyes. Min-jae did not leave Seoul. Tae Yang found out on a Tuesday. Seo-jun laid a photograph on his desk without a word. Surveillance image, grainy, time-stamped. Min-jae outside a coffee shop in Gangnam. 2 men with him that Tae Yang didn't recognize. The kind of men you hire when you need a message delivered to a specific address at a specific time. He looked at the photograph for a long moment. Find out what he's planning, he said, and put someone at the school. Seo-jun left without being told twice. Kate noticed nothing different about Jack on Tuesday. He came home at the usual time, ate his after-school snack with the systematic focus he applied to everything, and sat at the kitchen table working through his homework. When she asked about his day, he said it was fine. When she asked if anything unusual happened, he said no. He did not tell her about the man he had seen standing near the school gates. The one who watched the children leave but didn't wait for any of them. The one who looked at him for 3 seconds too long and that he had memorized his face. The photograph arrived on Kate's phone at 11:47 that night. She was still in her coat. Just home from a double shift, her bag half on the floor, halfway through pouring water from the kettle. The notification lit up her screen and she almost didn't look at it. Then she did. Jack, coming out of the school gates. The image was sharp and close enough that she could see the strap of his backpack, the way he always wore it on one shoulder even though she had told him 100 times to use both. Someone had been standing near enough to touch him. There were no words in the message. There didn't need to be. Kate set down the kettle very carefully. Then she sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and pressed both hands flat against the tile and breathed. In the next room, Jack was asleep, his small shape under the blanket, his watch charging on the nightstand. She called Tae Yang. He picked up on the first ring. "I know," he said, the same 2 words. But this time his voice was different, tighter. Something underneath it she had not heard before. "He was at the school," she said. "Someone was at Jack's school." "Yes." A pause. "Kate, I need you to listen to me very carefully." She was listening. "You are not going to work tomorrow. Jack is not going to school. I am moving you both tonight. A car is already on its way to your building. Tae Yang, please." The word came out the way the first please had. Unexpected, unguarded. The word of a man who does not ask easily. "Please let me do this." She looked at the photograph again, at the strap of his backpack. "Okay," she said. The safe house was an apartment in Itaewon. High floor, clean lines, the kind of place that looked like nobody lived there and was designed to stay that way. Kate sat on the couch with Jack asleep against her shoulder and watched the city lights and tried to organize her thoughts into something manageable. Tae Yang arrived at 2 in the morning. He came through the door with Seo Jun and 2 men she didn't know, spoke to them in Korean for 30 seconds, and then the room was quiet and it was just the 2 of them and Jack, who had not woken up for any of it. Tae Yang sat in the chair across from her. He looked at Jack for a moment. Something moved through his expression, not sentiment exactly. Something older and quieter. "Tell me what you know," Kate said. He told her everything. Min-jae. The decision not to leave. The men in Gangnam. The photograph at the school that had been sent not to hurt Jack but to show Tae Yang exactly how close they could get. "He's not trying to harm us," Kate said slowly. "He's using us against you." "Yes." "Because he knows we matter." Tae Yang didn't answer that directly, which was its own kind of answer. "How long have you known he didn't leave?" she asked. "Since this morning." "You should have told me." "Yes," he said. "I should have." The honesty of it disarmed her. She had been prepared for an explanation, a justification, the reasonable logic of a man who managed information the way he managed everything. Instead, he just agreed with her. Sat with the fact that he had been wrong. "You were trying to handle it before it reached us," she said. "I was trying to protect you from the part that wasn't resolved yet." "That's not your decision to make," she said in a loud voice, feeling scared and angry, all at once. "No," he said. "It isn't." Silence. Outside, Seoul moved through the night the way cities do. Indifferent, continuous, unconcerned with the conversation happening 30 floors above it. "Are you afraid?" Kate asked, calming down after a while. He looked at her for a moment. Really looked at her. "Yes," he said. It came out without armor on it. Without the careful distance he put between himself and things that could cost him. "I have not been afraid in a very long time. Not since my parents died. I had decided, not consciously, but decided all the same, that I would not let anything matter enough to be afraid of losing it. He paused. And then, a 7-year-old boy grabbed my sleeve. Kate looked at her son, still asleep against her. The absolute trust of him. The way he had walked into a room full of danger with crayon drawings in his fist and not one molecule of doubt. He gets it from his grandmother, she said softly. He gets it from you, Tae Yang said. You walked into the same room too. She didn't have an answer for that. 3 days passed. Kate learned the rhythms of the safe house, the way the light moved through the windows in the morning, the sound of Seo-jun's footsteps in the corridor. Jack, who had been told only that they were staying somewhere new for a few days, and had accepted this with the equanimity of a child who trusted that the adults had reasonable reasons, turned the apartment into a project. He reorganized the kitchen. He built something out of the spare couch cushions that he described as a fortress, but which looked, from above, exactly like a medical triage bay. Tae Yang came every evening. He never said this was his plan. He simply arrived. Sometimes with food, not restaurant food, which surprised her, but groceries, actual ingredients, which surprised her more. He cooked badly and without apology. Jack told him exactly what was wrong with his technique, and he listened with the attentiveness he applied to everything and improved slightly each time. On the third evening, Kate sat at the kitchen counter watching the two of them argue about the correct way to make ramen and felt something shift in her chest, something she recognized because she had felt its absence for 4 years. The specific warmth of a life that has a person in it. She looked away before either of them could see her face. Seo-jun came to the door at 6 a.m. on the 4th day. Kate was already awake. She heard his voice in the corridor, low and quick. She heard the change in the quality of Tae Yang's silence. She got up and stood at the bedroom doorway and looked at them both. "Tell me," she said. Seo-jun glanced at Tae Yang. "Tell me," she said again. Tae Yang nodded once. Min-jae had been tracked to a location in Mapogu. His 2 hired men had separated. One was already being handled. The other had been watching the hospital. He had learned Kate's shift patterns from the Public Employee Board outside the nurses' station, which nobody had ever thought to secure because nobody had ever thought it mattered. He had been waiting for her to go back. "He counted on me going back to work," Kate said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "So let me," she said. The silence in the room changed quality entirely. "Absolutely not," Tae Yang said. "I'm not asking for permission." Her voice was steady, not angry, the voice of someone who has thought this through and arrived at a conclusion. "He is using Jack and me as leverage against you because we are hidden. If I go back, with your people already in place, we control the timing. We choose the ground. He doesn't get to keep dictating when and where. You are not bait. I know I'm not bait. I'm a nurse going back to her shift." She looked at him. "You will have people there. I trust you to have people there, but I am not staying in this apartment while some man I have never met holds my life hostage." A pause. "My grandmother did not raise me to sit still and wait." Tae Yang looked at her for a long time. Seo-jun looked at the ceiling. "Every exit," Tae Yang said finally. "Every floor. And you do not go to the parking structure alone." "Agreed," she said. She went back on a Thursday evening shift. The hospital felt the same. The familiar weight of her badge, the smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner. Her colleagues at the nurses' station who said they were glad she was back and didn't ask questions she didn't want to answer. She worked. She focused on her patients the way she always did. Completely, with the full attention that had made her good at this. For 6 hours she was just Kate Beaumont, nurse, and the rest of it was a problem that existed in the world outside the ward doors. At 11:30 she finished her rounds. She collected her bag from the locker room. She took the stairs toward the ground floor exit. She did not go to the parking structure. The parking structure was where he was waiting. She had reached the second-floor landing when she heard the door below her open. Not the sound of someone arriving, The sound of someone who had been waiting and had just decided to move. 3 men. The stairwell was narrow. She had nowhere to go up that they couldn't follow. She went down. It was a decision made in the half-second before thought catches up with instinct. If she ran up, they would have her cornered. Down was the direction of other people, of the hospital entrance, of the 2 men Tae Yang had placed at the ground floor, who she had clocked on her way in and pretended not to notice. She came through the stairwell door at speed and collided with something solid that turned out to be Tae Yang, not Seo Jun, not one of the men she had catalogued near the entrance, Tae Yang himself, in the corridor outside the stairwell, who caught her by both arms and said her name once, sharply, and looked at her face and then looked past her at the door she had just come through. Behind her, the door opened again. It closed just as quickly. She didn't see what happened in the stairwell. She heard voices, brief, controlled, the sound of a situation being resolved without escalation, the sound of people fighting. Seo Jun's voice barking orders. Tae Yang had not let go of her arms. She realized her hands were gripping the front of his jacket. Neither of them moved for a moment. "I told you not to go to the parking structure," he said. His voice was shaking. She could hear, underneath the control. "I didn't go to the parking structure," she said. He pulled her in and held her the way a man holds something he came very close to losing. Not gently. Fully. His hand at the back of her head. She felt his heartbeat, and it was fast. Fast in a way she suspected it very rarely was. She held on. After a moment she said, against his shoulder, "Are they—" "Handled," he said. "Minji as well. It's done." She pulled back enough to look at him. "You came yourself," she said. "I will always come myself," he said. Not a reassurance, a statement of permanent fact, the way he said all true things. She looked at him in the corridor of a hospital at 11:45 at night, fluorescent lights humming above them, the ordinary world going about its business 10 meters away, behind a set of double doors. "I had a grandmother," she said quietly, "who told me that real things are worth being afraid of. You told me that. I'm telling you again," she held his gaze. "I am terrified of this. Of you. Of what it means that you came here yourself instead of sending someone. I am keeping that fear." A pause. "And I am choosing this anyway." He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that means something is being decided at a deep and permanent level. "All the way," he said. "All the way," she agreed. He kissed her in the corridor outside the stairwell of Seongbuk General Hospital, which was not the most romantic location in Seoul, but which neither of them would remember that way. They would remember the fluorescent lights humming and her hands still holding his jacket, and the ordinary miraculous fact of a moment that almost didn't happen. He came to the safe house with her to tell Jack it was over. Jack was awake. It was past midnight and Jack was awake, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, with a glass of water and the expression of someone who had been waiting for information and had run out of patience for pretending to sleep. Kate stood in the doorway. Jack looked at Tae Yang. Then he looked at the way they were standing and holding hands. He picked up his glass of water with the composure of a 7-year-old who has been proven correct about something significant and is being gracious about it. "Finally," he said. He looked up, looked at their hands, looked at Tae Yang, looked at his mother, said nothing. But the expression on his face was one of pure, complete, entirely self-satisfied joy. The expression of someone whose plan had worked exactly as intended. Down to the detail. Here is what nobody had ever fully understood about Jack Beaumont. He had not walked into Hanwoo that night only because he needed help. He had looked at his mother, who worked 12-hour shifts and came home and made dinner and helped with homework and held everything together without once letting him see how heavy it was. And he had made a decision. She deserved more than just fixed. She deserved someone who would stay. And so he had gone. In the rain, across 3 streets he was not supposed to cross, into a room he was not supposed to enter, and grabbed the sleeve of the right man and said exactly the right words. His grandmother Celeste had always told him, "If something needs doing, you do it yourself." Jack Beaumont had taken that advice completely literally. He was 7 years old, and he was absolutely right. That is the story of Kate, Jack, and Kim Tae Yang. Here is my question, and I genuinely want your answer. Which moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it Jack walking through those doors alone in the rain? Was it Kate cancelling the flights at midnight on her bathroom floor? Was it Tae Yang ending a 7-year loyalty without a second of hesitation? Or was it Jack saying finally at the kitchen table? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and I want to know which part stayed with you. If this story moved you, please like this video, comment, and share it with one person tonight. It is the only way these stories find the people who need them. Subscribe if you haven't. New stories every week. Stories that stay with you long after you finish watching. See you next time, Beasties.